Test, test. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the September 23rd, 2025 work session. I'd like to announce that meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with the recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board YouTube channel. Move on to item 3, budget and finance. Item 3.01, budget development calendar 2026. 2027, Mr. Longwell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Up. 26, 27. That's something, especially as we just wrapped up the 25-26 school year. I'm sorry, the budget for the 25-26 school year, and that we're still actually waiting on information from the state on their budget. So as they're still trying to wrap up 25-26, we're starting to think about 26-27. So from our board's perspective, I know we have a season board. The budget development calendar is something that we look at annually about this time of year. Really outlines over the course of the year by month what's happening, what are our staff doing, our teacher leaders, our administrators, what review processes are we doing internally, whether that be with respect to our budget or with our vendors, our consortiums, things of that nature, and then ultimately what are the places where we're coming to the board to talk about progress updates on the budget. And so just as an example of that, I'd like to highlight a couple places here at the board that are probably key points. Generally speaking, when you boil down the budget development calendar in the fall, our teacher leaders are working over the next several months to prepare their cost centers, ultimately presenting them to Dr. Bowman and a variety of other administrators, Sherry Woodall, Mrs. Ely. Ultimately, then that continues through the fall and into the winter months where our administrators are preparing their cost centers, and then final proposals to cabinet around January, February timeframe. And the reason we have that timeline is then by February, we're trying to assemble the final budget proposal for the school board, coming back to the board for the 2-part presentation in the month of March. And then ultimately that culminates with presentations to the board of the proposed final budget in April, and then the final budget in June, where we adopt the budget, set the tax rates, and then move forward into the following school year. You'll notice in the budget development calendar, you don't see July and August, but that's probably the time where we're still working in 3 years as we talk about that with the school board. So, you know, June 30th, we just wrapped up the year prior. And so we're looking at what trends are we seeing, what types of things might need adjusted in the budget, having those discussions with Dr. Bitts and cabinet. But then ultimately we're starting to work in the current year, which is now 25-26, still waiting in this case for the state budget numbers just to see where are we ultimately with the current budget year, but then also starting to think about that 26-27 budget and try to zero in on what adjustments do we need to see based on trends, what adjustments do we need to see based on teacher leader proposals or administrator proposals, and then coming back to the school board for additional discussion. So
just be the broken record here and reiterate that. So September, October, November, we are beginning to have conversations and prepare the budget for 26-27. And we still don't know what a quarter of our revenue is for 25-26. So that is the most frustrating part right now. It's not that we can't pay the bills. We're still in a position to be able to do that for this school year. Some districts aren't, but for us, time keeps on ticking, and we still don't even have any idea what the budget picture for 25-26 is going to look like, let alone the budget we're trying to go into to develop. And it ultimately costs our local taxpayers because we had to make that decision. You all had to make the hard decision to increase taxes to the level that we did last year with an incomplete picture from the state. And we'll have to do it again this year with an even more incomplete picture because we still don't even know what this year has in store. So just very frustrating. It's the reminder when we see the calendar for the next year, just how much.
It's an excellent point Dr. Bitts makes, and would just build a little bit more on something he said there. He alluded to the decisions we've made about taxes, either in 25-26 or even building on for 26-27. Ultimately in November, we often will look at the Act 1 index with the board. And so depending on where the state's at, you know, you could be in a position where we made a decision about 25, 26, and then do you adopt the index for 26, 27? And so as this drags on, I think that it's just very.
Maybe they'll put a budget together for 2 years since they're so late. I was just saying.
Yeah, this is what always scares me, and I think like as an individual, I would probably benefit from some of the proposals I've seen, but like elimination of property tax, and go to other forms of state taxation. Is how schools survive if every year 100% or nearly 100% of revenue stream would be coming from the state level as opposed to the local. I don't know how we could do it. With them waiting months and months and months to even see any revenue, let alone we're only losing 25% here. Go the other way, and I mean, how would you operate?
I think to your point, real estate taxes, there's a high degree of predictability for real estate taxes. I mean, certainly the assessments growing and those things, but there's not nearly that level of predictability for income taxes. And so when we look at that with the board, that line can be all over the place, you know, and so those issues of how do you fund school districts, they're very, very complex to your point. And I think to tie it so much to PIT or an earned income tax, really you could end up with even more uncertainty, I'll say, than what currently exists.
So in all of your years of experience, is this the latest that the state has gotten back to us?
It's either the second latest or the latest. There was one, and I was trying to remember how far that one went, but it was similar to this. I don't know if it went further than this. I mean, now that we're in September, I gotta believe this is either the second or the most.
Was that Tom Wolf's first term, I think? I think it was his first term went really, really long.
I think there was one more. But so maybe the second longest, but I think this is your 15th preparing budgets, and so this one's definitely on the longer end by quite a bit.
It's like there was a 9-month impasse in 2015, first year of.
Yeah, that was the
Governor
first year. Any questions or additional conversation on the budget development calendar of 2026, 2027?
I just appreciate the process that the administration goes through. It's just very tedious, long, but well worth it. And why we're in good shape. That's
We're very fortunate to have a
very,
good team all around.
absolutely.
All
100%.
Great team. Item 3.02, state and federal grants, 2025, 2026. Goes along well.
So this is typical this time of year, giving the board an update on our grants and kind of where we're spending those monies. We will look at both the state and the federal revenue sources in terms of grant funding. I think as much as it's typical this time of year, I also think it's interesting with the backdrop of some of the conversation around federal funding and, you know, what grants school districts receive. So I think that'll be some good context as well about what monies we do receive from the federal and state governments, but also what we're spending those monies on. And so these are probably the biggest ones that we receive as a school district. And so in terms of recurring federal grants, Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV represent regular, I'll say regular and more recurring in terms of what we get from the federal government. All four of them have a little different purpose, and we'll talk about that as the presentation unfolds. And then also IDEA Part B is another federal grant. Really, in our financials, it's shown in the 6,000 series of our revenues. Not to get all accounting here at lingo, but that's passed through the IU, but it is in fact federal dollars, and it's for special education. And then in terms of state grants, we want to talk with the board here this evening about a couple PCCD grants, and then finally a facility school improvement grant, which was tied to one of our projects, but it's also a celebration that we had gotten that money in the first place to help with those improvements. So a little more information on the recurring federal grants. There you can see the numbers in terms of Title I, Title II, Title III, IV, and then IDEA. I think the one thing I wanted to point out on this slide was there was definitely some dialogue and some conversation around what are Title II, III, and IV used for, and how much money is it? And so for our school district, that's about $216,000 if you add that together for Title II, III, and IV. And then on the next slide, we can talk a little more about, frankly, all the federal grants, but what they're used for.
Yeah, I'll just remind you that specifically those two rows, that $210,000 was the money that was being withheld by the federal government earlier this year and then was released. So those rows are the ones that we're particularly interested in seeing while it's released for us this year. What is the future of those particular rows? But that's about the money. And Mr. Long will talk more about what we've been spending that money on. Should be cognizant.
So for this evening, just a little deeper look, as Dr. Bush shared, about what each of the funding sources are, the funding streams, and then what we use the money for. And so in terms of Title I, you can see largely just being spent on salaries and benefits for our reading teachers at 4.6 FTEs for the board, acronym full-time equivalent. And so not that you can divide a person by 6/10, but it's how we charge people's salaries to the grants. And so in some cases, as much as we might want to charge 5, it may not be possible for a variety of reasons. Or it could also be because of their assignment and whether it fits within the kind of the guidelines for federal funding or not. In that particular case, the other thing I would just point out is the 4/10 of the FTE would just come out of our local sources. And so some of that just is funded locally versus what we are charging to the federal grant. So reading teachers, you can see there, and instructional assistants. And then in addition, instructional materials. And then Title I, we do have some carve out responsibilities for our non-public services. And so for our non-public schools, Mrs. Whittle and Mrs. Ely, but particularly Mrs. Whittle works on the Title I side of things in conjunction with our non-public services. In
I'm
terms,
sorry, can you explain what non-public services mean?
So a school like St. Joe's, for example.
That's what I thought.
Private school, depending on certain configurations within the grant, there is some money from our Title I that actually goes towards some services at those schools. And then you're in charge of tracking that money, tracking on what it's been spent on, all kinds of tracking.
And some kids that are in our own district that go, not on us.
it's a great point Dr. Bitts makes, because as much as we talk about the compliance requirements that we have for these grants, then we end up with compliance requirements for the non-pubs that we're passing the money through to. So not only are we being mindful of our own compliance requirements, then we're also trying to assist the non-pubs in what they can and can't use the money that they get out of that as their startup operations.
So like the pro schools, it's money, we don't. Or do we also, could we provide like somebody to blend with special, I guess?
I would say at this point, I'm not sure that we've provided anything beyond the money. The IU actually provides a good bit of the professional development services that they tap into. I don't know.
It's just that
Programs that.
because it's our students, the money would go there to help them, compensate them. Right.
Yes.
It's proportional based on more kids with more money versus certain other non-pubs that perhaps maybe get small. Title II and IV are kind of grouped together there because ultimately they help improve and support our program. So in particular, you can see literacy coaches charged to those grants, and then also instructional coaches as well, K-5. And then again, some non-pub services similar to Title I, and then you'll see it likewise in Title III. It's just a function of how the federal grants are structured and then what our obligations are in not only spending the money for ourselves, but in supporting those non-publics.
But that doesn't include cyber schools.
No, they get their own money. We could talk a lot about that.
No, but I just want to make sure they're not getting any of this money.
No, it's a good question.
Title II and Title IV are for professional development. Title III is for ELD, right? That's the way it used to be. That's my problem.
Generally.
In
That's
overall. Right.
yeah.
That's the question, Mrs. Hoffman, to your point, maybe a good segue to Title III, where you can see we're largely using the monies for language instruction. And so in that instance, we have instructional assistant charged to it, as well as professional development, and then again, non-public services.
And our grant amounts are formula based on what, like, we have a ELD population that grows every year. Does Title III grow and its way is helpful to us? I mean, we're funding an IA, but we only funded an ELD teacher in the high school, right? So, or more than that, so.
I'd like
Curious
to
about
say,
that.
we see big increases, but unfortunately, because it's the pie graph that we like to include in our budget presentations, all of the federal funds represent just 1% of the total pie. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, if you start to boil all that down, even the increases that do come through aren't enough to really pay for like an additional teacher per se. But they, in fairness, they do increase some, and they are, depending on which one of the ones you're talking about, they are, as you said, influenced by socioeconomic, they're influenced by ELD populations, they're influenced by special ed. So there's a variety of factors, and each one probably has some specific factors to whichever federal grant you're talking about.
I guess I'm thinking about growing funding, but you start off by saying like, these were the ones that were at risk because the federal government doesn't believe that it's worth funding. Or at least the current administration doesn't believe in funding ELD or instructional coaches.
I think from my perspective, it's also helpful to even just see which grants were being talked about and how do we use the monies in Mechanicsburg. I would submit Title II, III, and IV, you can see directly impact programs in our district, and even without the money, we still have commitments in those areas anyway. So. Over to state grants. So you can see there's a couple PCCD grants. They each have a little bit different requirements in terms of how those monies can be spent. And then ultimately the DCED grant that we got for public school facility improvement grant. That's a very long way to say we got some additional monies to help our local construction projects. Appreciate Dr. Bitz's support and our administrative team in going after this grant. And ultimately we were awarded $1 million that we did use then to offset some of the costs at the middle school. So that's kind of an example in my mind of we were already going to embark on the middle school project because we knew there were needs around HVAC and the stair towers, but ultimately through kind of I'll say a discretionary grant, a competitive grant, maybe is a better word for it. We were awarded that extra $1 million, which I think went a long way to the project.
I don't know what PCCD stands.
Pennsylvania
Boy.
Commission on Crime and
Crime
Delinquency.
and Delinquency.
And
Sorry, I was hoping Dr. Bitz would help me out.
Actually, you'll get it.
Working through that a little bit.
DCED is the Department of Community and Economic Development.
Yes, that's another, yeah. Probably need to spell the acronyms out. So over to, in a similar way as we broke out the federal grants and talked about how we spent the money, we wanted to just give a quick snapshot of these particular state grants and talk a little bit about how we're spending. So in terms of the behavioral health, you can see we're using that for contracted services for behavioral health training and intervention. And so really thinking about student services and the work that Mrs. Bridges and Mrs. Bott do, a lot in that arena for this PCCD behavioral health. And then in terms of PCCD's grant for school safety and mental health grants, we're using that money to help offset the school resource officer as we continue to embark on that partnership with the township. And then we're still working with the borough to get somebody lined up there as well. And then talked about this one a little bit already, but DCD Public School Facility Improvement Grant was to help us with the MMS project. And in particular, the way we wrote the grant was around HVAC because it was a competitive grant. We tried to think about what best will position us to receive funding through a competitive process. And so we had applied for the HVAC system afterwards. That is a quick overview of our grants, state and federal. And if there's any other questions?
I have a question. How do we decide to go after state grants? There seem to be more there and sometimes they come up. There was a recent one on solar that schools were applying for instance, but I also think there's annual ones. So what's our choice?
Yeah, I think, I mean, certainly we want to evaluate grant opportunities and do so uniformly. I also think within that, though, there probably are situations where maybe it just doesn't fit our vision for the direction the district's going. There are other instances where when you look at the rubric, it's gonna be an uphill battle, right? You know, so like food service is a good example of that, where when you go down through the rubric, we're already probably at a little bit of a disadvantage compared to other school districts, because right out of the gate, they look at SES, free and reduced percentages, you know, for some of those equipment grants. And then they also take that a step further to say, okay, if you're saying you need an equipment grant, how much money do you have in your fund balance in your food service fund? And so depending on the grant and how it's positioned in terms of the rubric, or depending on how you're to spend the money, I think help guide some of those decisions. But ultimately, we're always looking for grants and additional funds. Yeah.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Longwell. Item 5, facilities. Item 5.01, construction update. Dr. Pitts.
Yeah, I'll take you through the first portion of this, and we're gonna tag team a little bit between construction and facilities, so I'll hand this back off to Mr. Long for a little bit. And we also have Mr. Hoffman here, and I have to take a second just to acknowledge the incredible work that he continues to do. He has done it for us as a district for years, but his position has continued to evolve. And as our support to the construction projects has begun to change here over the last 6 months or so, that has added more to his plate in the realms of responsibility, and he has just done an amazing job with it. So much of the progress that we can celebrate on the next couple of slides has a lot to do with the leadership that he showed. So thank you for that. And talking, of course, about Mr. Kastner is on his way off to another project with end in sight here with us, but he continues to have just a few hours a week that he continues to provide us with some support with the closure of some projects. Mr. Harris is finishing things up. There'll be an official date on the next board meeting that we'll be looking at on that personal as well. So again, a lot moving to Mr. Hoffman. Job. So just want to update you. I'm going to take the first part of this on updates to some projects that we've had going on. And we'll start at the middle school, because as you likely remember, we had a number of projects on the slate, and we're really using this as an opportunity to even get some work done that maybe has been out there for a little bit. We said, well, if we're just shutting middle school offline for the summer, let's do all of these. So the stair towers, you can see the one stair tower there on the right. That is the stair tower that is on the right as you walk into the building. So you can see you still have some huge windows there, this time just now in the stair tower instead of at the entrance to the stairs. And then the stair tower on the left-hand side is as well. Classrooms on the upstairs are being used. They're used by kids already, and they're great spaces. And then the local classrooms, I think, have started to get their furniture.
I was meeting last week. So I think they're being used this week.
So some finishing touch work, I think, overall, but pretty good to go. The gym floor, if you thought our gym floor at the middle school was yellow, you wouldn't be completely wrong, because it's hard to believe just how yellowed it had become after not being refinished completely since we built the middle school. But now that it has been refinished, you go up there and the pictures do a pretty good justice, but when you go in there just to see the gym floor. So I had that finished here this summer. Auditorium lighting, you might remember that in the back of the auditorium, we've always had a little bit of black hole back there. So we had an additional row of lights in the back that have been added to be able to see that space. Masonry repair project. Mr. Hoffman, you can probably describe that better than I can.
Yeah, it was an extensive project in the exterior of the building to prepare route work around windows, louvers, and just normal weathering for a building that kind of sits up by itself in the weather. Well, it was needed, and these guys worked for 4 months on it. So it was quite a project, but it finished up the week that school started.
And that was your staff that did that work?
No, that was not. That was a project that was pre-bid and it was housing construction.
I think, to Dr. Bitt's point, with Mr. Hoffman and the rolling utilities and construction, all of these things are happening simultaneously, you know, and so it's the work with middle school, there's a few more projects I know Dr. Bitt's going to talk about here this evening that also happened over the summer, but coordinating all those pieces, it's, you know, it's a busy summer.
It is. The gym floor refinishing, is that outside work or is that done by?
So this work in particular was outside work. Every year we refinish the gym floors, which is, you scrub it and you remove the top layer of the wax and apply new wax. And that builds up. And after 20, 25 years, it needs to be ground down to the base wood and it process starts.
So is this the same group that did the high school gym then?
It was, I believe, the same group that did that. So, yeah, there's not many of these groups that do it. So it's one of those that when you think you're going to be getting started on one, you got to get on it early. That's all they do. And 2 or 3 state that do it.
Yeah, I mean, I just see the picture here, but the high school gym looks amazing. So, yes,
Great. You can grind it down and take it to the wood, take off the old, but that's all you need to, right? Yeah.
Last one at the middle school is the HVAC replacement. So this one, there's kind of 2 lenses to it. The first half is done, which was kind of preparation for the new units. And then once the cooling season is over here, yes, the next couple of weeks will be in a place to be able to actually install.
Yeah, the new units are on roof. The boiler system, which is our heating system, is going to be ready to start at the beginning of October. Once we get into that, work the kinks out, we'll probably take the cooling side of the HVAC system off. And then they'll work on that. That should take another 2 months, I believe. And hopefully come spring, we'll be able to get it balanced and we're good to go for cooling season.
And in the midst of all of that, they were able to, with building offline, really do deep clean, if you will, of some areas of middle school. Traditionally, middle school is the last one to be cleaned almost every summer. So they're always kind of rushing through the final stretch. So this was a good opportunity for them to get back to some spaces maybe that they haven't been as well last year. High school. So track replacements. Orient you here with a couple different pictures. So the top left picture, this is the new storage building. So this, sorry, I'm going to use track language for you here. It's in the back turn, so it's at the start of the 200-meter race in the back corner. So you can see the development there behind it. It's kind of on the left there. That's like the driveway that wraps around the track back towards the starting line and back into the back. So, then one on the right-hand side, that's about midway through the first turn on the track, looking back towards the student parking lot. You can see the new storage shed. You can see the pad for the spectator seating. One of the old sets of bleachers is sitting there right now, but there will be 2 larger sets of bleachers that will be on that pad then eventually. So you can see the paving that's been done on the track. Right? And then in the bottom, this is actually from the back length of the track, again looking towards the softball fields. There you can see the jumping pits. So we're in a place where the paving, it has to sit for 30 days. So that 30 days is up here in the next couple of weeks. And at that point, we'll be ready for the surfacing, which is a different company that'll come in to put down the black rubber surface, top rubber surface. We had to navigate some timing challenges with that, but I think we're on a good trajectory to be able to have that done here this fall and be able to have everybody on the track here next spring.
So does that have to fall within like temperature, like asphalt does?
Yeah, so this layer has to cure for 30 days, and then the installation of the rubber layers has to have curing periods and has to meet some temperature guidelines, which the company will work with at this point. Feels very comfortable with where we're at. Calendar.
This is a dumb question, but only because I was looking at the black current surface, but the final coat's gonna look like the red that was there before the approved was there
Well,
before.
it's actually gonna be two-tone, if I remember from the picture where the handoff zones are gonna be black, I think, and then the rest is gonna be maroon, but yeah, it's gonna be sharp. Cool. Then some other projects, Broad Street, similar HVAC replacement project. I think we're on a very similar timeline trajectory as we described in the middle school. Yeah. And then sewer line replacement, this was what we had briefed you on during the summer and the beginning of the school year. We were able to replace the entirety of the sewer line down the whole main hallway. There's still a small section to be done in the kitchen that due to time and where it is, it's just too tricky to try and do this summer. So we're just navigating things as we need to. Marlon and her staff are doing a great job of navigating that for this year. And then we'll get that last little piece in the kitchen area next summer. And then finally, the River Rock Charlestown playground replacement.
Yeah.
Update.
That was finished 2 weeks ago. And they're using it, and they're loving it. So we're all happy to get that in. And looks good. Just check that.
I heard from my Sharonstown families, oh, look, do playground equipment.
Have you used the swings there?
Why?
Yeah.
No,
No.
I just had a friend walk by.
Going
and
down
say,
the slide?
What's going on?
Whatever, I don't know what that is.
So
Right.
that's everything that we have been working on. So we'll take you back now to the facilities planning recommendations and the group that had gotten together and just looking ahead. And I'll kind of preview and Mr. Long will take us through the list, but ultimately, these are all items that the next steps you would hear more about before we move forward, whether that is with bidding or approvals or any of that kind of thing. But this is just that list to let you know what we're continuing to explore. A number of these items are things we've already previewed for you in the past, but definitely just want to continue to have this list on your minds as we look ahead.
Thank you, Dr. As Dr. Pitt shared, continuing to go back to the facilities planning committee and thinking about the recommendations from that committee. We've been continuing to crosswalk what we've already done. Some of those things you've seen either this summer or prior even, but also knowing that there's still some things out there that we want to continue to look at. And so in terms of the recommendations themselves, I would say in the short term, this is a listing, not all inclusive, because I know we also separately have our capital reserve fund budget that we bring forward to the board. And so that is going to continue to be just how we upkeep our facilities. It's recommendations from the principals and our administrators about things that might be coming up in their respective areas. But ultimately, from our perspective, as it relates to the committee's work and the larger projects that are still outstanding for the next year, 2 or 3 years, these are things that are on our mind. I would share the first one, the site layout, Mechanicsburg Middle School. This is something we've talked a little bit about, gone through different iterations of the site layout at the middle school. There was kind of the pre-pandemic. There was what we did in response to the pandemic. And then on the other side of the pandemic, we had made additional adjustments. I think frankly, some of the issue there is just the sheer amount of car riders we have, right? But there's also the traffic flow in relation to the middle school, the Upper Allen campus there, with Shepherdstown, Upper Allen. And we know that we want to continue to look at that site layout a little closer, probably engaging an engineer, site engineer, to look at the current site, what are what are pros and cons of that? Ultimately, are there adjustments that can be made to the current site, or are there bigger issues yet that maybe need to be addressed? And so, as Dr. Butch shared, I think there's more to come there. But this is a project that is in our mind, and working with Mr. Hoffman and the crew to kind of flush that out a little more also.
Mr. Longwell, I should say about this, because I'm sorry, but you and I talked about this on Friday, looked at the agenda together. Like, it's really frustrating that we have to look at the site layout again for the middle school when site layout was, and I mean the parking and the extra road that we cut in to York Street, down to York Street. In what I still think of as the current projects that we're talking about that Mr. Kastner was a part of and so on. So like, this is not that long ago, 6-7 years ago. When you say pre-pandemic, like we did it in 2019 or something. So the idea that it needs to be addressed with a professional and then probably reworked with moving dirt around is frustrating. And yet I also understand that, like, I don't like driving by there every day and seeing that we have cones set up because to block things that are in place now. So I get that there is an issue, but it's also like, it's frustrating because, you know, we engage professionals to fix the issue before and it has not been addressed. So that's just slightly annoying.
I think I would just say we share that frustration, and I think we've got a number of campuses that through the renovations are working beautifully. And I think we have a few, I know we have a few that are not, or that we've had to make adaptations to beyond what was really actually planned, and our adaptations are working better than what was originally planned. So it is frustrating for us too, but one that we think could be better than what.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The middle school's always been clear to kind of drive around, so.
Yeah.
In the get-go.
Sort of golden growth and all of those things, and I think it's just something that we'll come back to and study a little more to. The natatorium diving boards, I know this is probably an example of a number of these items. On the surface, there's a topic, there's a project, but there's also a lot of connected pieces in the background of different conversations I think that need to happen. And so natatorium diving boards, you know, where is Mr. Mahanic with swim team and diving? You know, where are we at in terms of adding potentially diving boards, and is that a capital reserve fund item, timing and those things? But ultimately, this is a project that's also on our mind to continue to look after that point.
If I could just pause you on that one, where did that, I know we had a number of iterations of the natatorium. Was diving boards in that plan originally?
So the foundations were.
Yeah, we had the foundations installed and ultimately installation of the boards themselves without having a team was going to impact the scoring of our current team. So we had the foundations installed and they are ready to have boards installed really within a fairly quick timeline.
Okay.
So right now our timeline is looking post this swimming season to be able to look at the boards themselves and be able to have it.
And was that a cost, like just not wanting to do all that cost at once, or what was the?
Obviously there were lots of discussions you all were a part of.
Right, that's
related
why
to the
maybe.
pool. So I think there were a number of reasons, one of them certainly being that if, as soon as you have diving boards, if you don't have a team and the other team that comes to you does have a team, you automatically lose those points. So for us to install diving boards without a team would have cost our teams immediately.
Okay.
We're in certain competition.
And the major cost would have been putting the foundations in.
Right, I remember.
Others,
they were gonna put
it's just
those
an
in.
add-on, like in terms of,
And having the
Construction
depth
costs,
of the
right.
pool.
Well, that, I remember the discussion about the depth, and we do have the depth.
Yeah, depth is there.
So this is
foundations are
just
there.
to confirm, this isn't high diving.
No.
1 meter. 1 meter. So everything's there, it's just a matter of you know, the chicken and egg, like, if you have them, then you have to have the team, so it's better get the team before you put them up, so you don't lose.
I thought we were losing points by not offering the facility when there is another team that has diving. Like I thought we'd get marked 10 off. As or have been for years. Or
As
something.
long as you don't have the facility for it, Seth each year notifies, I think it's somebody, and he has to say, we do not have the facility, and then we're not deducting.
That makes me feel better. I guess that this seemingly easy thing to just stick onto the foundations that are there will be done appropriately when we can field a team as well to.
So it's just a matter of purchasing the actual board.
And having them installed.
Installed.
Yeah. It's just saying a board makes it sound a little cheaper than what it's gonna be.
It goes down into the, you know, it's the whole
But
assembly.
they can be removed,
I think what's.
Yes.
I don't think they're like,
whether they could be taken on and off.
There it is. I mean, I think they're generally the kind that you
think of, there's not like a home board where you just take a few out and the insurance person's come.
I don't know, I've never had a pool.
Plans to train a team to like start to be in diving, so we have the team ready and then put the boards in.
the plan is for all of that to be in sync. Yes.
And that would be for the, not this coming swims, but the following,
That's what our timeline is
tentative.
pointing towards. Yes.
And so, yeah, I think that's a good point, not just for the auditorium, but for a lot of these projects is what is the right timing, right? You know, what types of conversations do we have to develop the project and the scope and the timeline? And so, while these are short-term, not all of them might not occur at the same exact moment, you know? So I think more by way of, checking in on the facilities planning recommendations, but then also more to come. So as Dr. Bitts shared, that we'll be back in each of them for future conversations. An example of that is the turf field proposal at Forsyth Elementary. And so I think if you go back to this spring and think about Mr. Pahanik's presentation on athletic program evaluation, credit to Mr. Panic and the athletic department. We're seeing a lot of success in our athletic department, boys and girls. We were just talking about that today with Dr. Bitts. So that's awesome. I think in the next breath, you also see increased participation, you know, not competition for practice time, but how do you manage all the fields and turf, existing turf and the other practice fields? And so from our perspective, when you look at turf fields in support of not just competition, but practice ability, Northside would be our recommendation ultimately. And when you look at schools our size, generally speaking, a lot of them do have probably 2 turf fields already.
So the value of the turf field is that we're gonna be able to use it more than Northside is able to be used now.
Yeah.
And so more kids, more playing time with it.
Because it's a grass competition field, it does need us a little bit, that we try to manage that. We don't want a lot of practices there to rip the grass field up. And then Northside, I mean, there's a variety of benefits, I think, to choosing Northside, but there's also all the infrastructure that's already there. And so the price tag on that installation at Northside is going to be much different than other locations you might otherwise choose, because we already have the lights, we already have bleachers, the sound system that we invested in not many years ago. So already done a variety of upgrades at that location.
In terms of competition too, I think Mr. Panic said we were one of the few schools that still have grass soccer fields. So when they go to districts playoffs, they're playing on a totally different surface. And you remember, we had a couple years where partly due to construction, but the grass field was not in good shape, right, due to water problems.
Yeah, it's in beautiful shape right now,
Yes.
that's for sure, but we've had some challenges with it over time. But the other piece to that is that there is a point in the playoffs where you have to play on a turf field. So you would actually be in a position where if you get far enough in districts where even if we're the home team, we won't be able to
Oh, wow.
host that game. It would have to be played like the couple about.
I asked that question because I was thinking, maybe this is even older thinking of, you know, turf fields are like vanity projects versus things that are necessary to increase participation, usage, and all the other things you've mentioned. So I hear all this, I think these are all good things, and it isn't about like, oh, we're gonna put another Wildcat, so.
Yeah.
And so that.
So I
would
like
have-
that part too, but that's not the.
That would have stadium, I mean, there'd be seating at that. too.
At percent.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we were looking to upgrade the seating that's already there. at the
So you're
moment,
talking about putting turf on the north side, current north
Yes.
side field?
Yes,
Oh, I was under the, when we had some of those discussions, there was talk of putting it beside or somewhere else.
No, we were
No.
talking about putting it inside of the track. So that was my question. It's like, is there still thoughts to put that as a turf field too?
But at one point, there was a discussion about putting on the baseball field there as supplemental and keeping the grass. I see, so we go in the current.
which actually is helpful from a cost perspective because the drainage and all of that, it's already built for that. If Eric can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, everything's ready for a turf to go in there, rather than building at that other location, even at the same general location.
Yeah.
It's also important to note, I think that, I don't know Mr. Bohannick's exact vision for it, but you'll be able to play other sports on it. You have a line for lacrosse or field hockey, I'm not sure what exactly you would do, but options are there and that frees up a ton of space for everybody. Both for practice and for play.
And I know we have increasing options of rental. I mean, it's first field would provide more rental income. For sure.
Next one is middle school track rehabilitation. And so up there, we have a cinder track currently, but I think as we continue to look at all of our athletic teams, our athletic opportunities, our extracurricular opportunities, I think certainly something that is next on the docket for consideration is the possibility of a middle school track and field team. The high school track and field team has a great turnout. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but very
About
low.
120.
120, and so just by the numbers and participation, you think about the middle school level opportunities for students. And that's something we've talked about over the years. You think about like the MAPS program, which is more extracurricular geared, but what are ways to get students engaged at the middle level? And I think this is a good logical step, but it has some connected conversations right now. So Mr. Panic is looking at that as part of an opportunity, but then fairness to the world, we also need to say there's implications around the middle school track rehabilitation. And then certainly as part of the budget process, we would look at coaching aspect, because you need to hire some coaches probably at the middle school level as well. So thinking about that as a package. Then on to HVAC replacement at the elementary schools. And so one thing I like to note here is, I know we're coming off a comprehensive financing plan. We looked at renovations at our elementary schools, our high school. Now we've recently done some things in the middle school. Ultimately, though, with all of our projects, we tried to maximize the useful life of our infrastructure, of our plumbing, our heating systems, our cooling systems. And so when we started, it's hard to believe all the planning way back in 2015, almost 10 years ago now. If there was additional life left in some of these systems, we try to maximize those so that we weren't just replacing a cooling system that maybe had 10 years of life left or 15 years of life left. But having done that, I think it certainly helps save us money along the way. But there's also a cycle then to maintain and upkeep those systems as we move forward. And so we're continuing to look at that with Mr. Hoffman in terms of our HVAC replacement and really largely probably coming back and looking at our elementary schools, because as the board probably recalls at the high school, we replaced the HVAC system as part of the high school project just because of the timing of the project and the condition of the system. Middle school, we just replaced the HVAC system. We are replacing it this summer, as Dr. Bitts and Mr. Hoffman shared earlier. Broad Street, we're working on right now as well. Elmwood, we did maybe a summer or two ago, Elmwood Academy. And so we are working through our buildings to say, what's the condition of the infrastructure, mechanical systems, and addressing what's needed.
Just never ends, does it?
I think facilities planning is never ending. It's just a cycle. You get through the cycle and then you refresh and you keep going. A little bit like homeownership, I guess.
Job security.
Yeah.
Keep telling us
Been on
about
the board too
regeneration.
long, it just seems to come around all the time.
Similar to that, sewer line replacement. And so I think while we certainly addressed some sewer lines through the projects where it made sense, I think there are still some, well, we know there are still some cast iron sewer lines in buildings, as we found out with Broad Street. That one was a surprise for us that needed addressed immediately. But our goal is to continue to look at all the buildings, map out all the sewer lines, just kind of assess the condition of some of those cast iron lines and then address them strategically as we can through the capital reserve fund process. Because I think in a perfect world, it'd be nice to be able to identify what's needed and then address them with a schedule versus like the Broad Street, which was a little bit for us. And so we're gonna continue to try to get that out as we plan for facilities. So last but not least, these were conversations that came out of the facilities planning committee, but weren't necessarily ones that we wanted or felt needed to be prioritized in the more near term, I'll say. But things that we don't want to lose sight of either, though, because as we continue to go through the years, we know there might be a future considerations or additional needs that we may need to look at. And so I would share with Memorial Stadium, one thing that did come out of the committee was additional bleachers. And so how does that impact seating capacity at Memorial Stadium? What are our needs there? And it's something that we'll continue to look at, not just from an athletic perspective, but graduation is held there, a variety of other events, music. And so knowing that we need to just think about what the seating capacity at the stadium looks like, that's part of the discussion or discussions. Elmwood Academy, the untouched spaces. And so I know we had several iterations where we worked to address Elmwood. I think the several iterations really came about as a result of Elmwood being the swing building. And so if you think about at the very beginning, when we moved the district office out of the second floor of Elmwood, we had to immediately start putting together all the pieces. It was like a big Rubik's Cube. And so we did address Elmwood along the way in certain aspects, like the site. We added some classroom space to address enrollment. But honestly, when you look at Elmwood Academy, it wasn't nearly the comprehensive project that the other elementary schools were. And so we don't want to completely forget about Elmwood. We know there were some untouched spaces. And so in the coming years here, continue to think about are there additional needs there at programmatic. Sorry.
I do wonder, have concern for Elmwood Academy, just from a number of students there. And I don't know when that gym, or I don't even know if you call them locker rooms, I've never been back in that area. Like, when's the last time that was ever touched?
They're all gone.
That space back there, the locker rooms were touched, but the gym itself was not. And really the whole Shepherdstown Road wing. So the far wing,
Oh,
by,
sixth grade,
yeah.
sixth grade.
that really wasn't touched at all.
I just feel like there's, and then there's so many, there are a lot of kids there. There is no space, not that I think we can fix this, but for them to all come together as a whole, two classes, I think nice. And part of me feels like maybe they're a little, but I know you had a committee and I know you went through the process, but I wonder about prioritizing more than 3 different athletic things that were on that first street.
Except we've been to Elmwood, how many times that I guess I'm the queen of complaining about Elmwood.
Well, I
But
think
it's because of how we had to do it in the timing on how we had to bring in some of those things.
the
It
Greg's
feels
talking about,
comprehensive because we hit it so
So
many
many
times.
times, yeah,
but it wasn't.
I also think, well, Greg talking about it in comparison to the other elementary buildings, but it's a high school. And that's the size of that building. So it's like, you have to touch it in phases in comparison to, Broad Street. You could, oh, we'll just replace the rest of the sewer line and no big deal. But like, this is not that kind of project. And I'll say, Julie, we walked, I was on that committee part that walked through all the spaces at Elmwood. And I can picture the windowless room in the 6th grade wing that someone was using for small group instruction, but it was a sad room that was like, with the HVAC got fixed, at least that's one good thing, but it was like, and there was a window just on the other side of the wall, but it had been walled off in some previous version. So I know there's more that definitely should be done. I wonder, and I also agree with you on the class size part and the overall, like what it may need to be moved up just from the idea of, well, if we have to add 2 more teachers or 4 more teachers, where do they go? If that's, I saw that earlier in the budget presentation, so I know we'll hear that later, but I agree with what you're saying, that it's important
If either of you, Mr. Longwell, Dr. Bitts want to correct this, that's fine, but my sense is too, our principle of equity meant that our elementary schools had to be addressed in a similar way, and I feel like in some ways, maybe that's why Elmwood has gotten, everybody uses it, so it almost gets like equity for everybody there, so I almost feel like it gets shortchanged in some ways because of that, which is understandable, but.
I think that's fair. I think there's also some very unique parts of it that a typical elementary school, even big elementary school wouldn't have. So I think I think the possibilities are still there to be able to bring it up, but I think it's fair.
I think Tracy's right too, that we've given it a lot of love over the last, like the last improvement to the cafeteria is great, and the media center and all that stuff. Like there's a lot that we've done, but we got to walk past the media center into that last area to.
Well, you might remember there were even some, not add-ons, it's called when we.
We did some value engineering.
No, when you put your bid out and there's pieces, not change orders. Alternates, thank you.
Yeah.
There were some alternates, I think it was about 5 alternates that were on that project that we did not accept. So there's a number of light fixtures in there that haven't been upgraded to LED. We had the what Mr. Yu calls the Pentagon, because there's 5 different types of wall that all comes together in one little lobby. The flooring is the same throughout. So there's a number of alternates that we did not accept through that process that have space still there.
I like the Pentagon, I like that part of it. You know, that's the thing that only matters to us and not to like 10-year-olds.
There's been some work to try to tie it together.
I think we have to remember a lot of this is deferred because of us reaching the borrowing.
Correct.
Like, and wouldn't have been able to do the other more necessary projects that, so we had to defer it out into the future, particularly the gymnasium, that it was recognized then it was not really up to snuff, that it would have been a lot of money that had to be used in some of the other projects.
I just wonder where in the priorities. I also have some committee recommendations. I see it as big.
One thing I'd like to note that the Broad Street sewer line project was a huge deal. And I know you're,
Didn't mean to make-
I know the point you're trying to make, but that was a nightmare. And an unbelievable job done by everybody involved to get it done.
I meant the length of it compared to if you had to do that at Elmwood, it would have been huge.
You're right.
Yeah.
The sewer line was down like 14 feet, I think, but that was quite a long.
One end. People.
And then lastly, as not to forget, Mr. Hoffman and his crew, I think an acknowledgement of facility support spaces, I would say. Our facilities department does an incredible job of supporting the district. And I'm not saying just because Mr. Hoffman's here, but ultimately knowing that, like, what does the facilities department need to effectively support our school district? And the buildings are like 30 to 40% larger. We have more staff across the board. What does storage space look like? Equipment, taking care of our equipment and these sorts of things. And so that's something that I know is kind of out there, and we just need to.
I would say every time I drive past that, I feel a little bad for you. I mean, I feel like that's an eyesore for the district, I think they deserve something.
I think that space was purchased in 2002, I think, and it was sort of renovated for the needs of the time. And things change and you outgrow it, and you add more vehicles and other pieces of equipment that you want to take care of and keep safe, and make sure it runs for as long as you can, and you have to sit outside. So it is what it is, but at some point we need to look at what do we need to do to work.
Even parking for the employees is a challenge.
Yeah, that's what I mean, just to drive through multiple
If you go to our,
driveways.
some of our deliveries can't get to our dock because of the parking lot's full and they can't make that angle and.
All right, well, I feel like that's someplace we need to
Got it.
put some time and effort.
You sold her.
Elmwood, I don't know, but yes, you.
What if they moved down?
There you go.
You should do it,
Okay, I think that's what we have here. I just wanted to thank the board for continuing to support our efforts on this journey. It's funny when you think about a 10 or 11-year plan. I've agreed through PASBO to help mentor a new CFO, and they're embarking on a series of construction projects, and she was asking, where do we start? And I said, well, how much time do we have?
And money.
There's a lot to talk about. But in all seriousness, really appreciate the school board. Where we are today is a tribute to all of the planning and hard work. Really, that started in 2015, and we know that it never really is over, and that we're continuing to look to the future to make sure our programs and our students and our staff are supported.
Talk about this in the budget process, the foresight and how early we're on top of stuff, having been on I think the last iteration of that planning team. It really is gratifying to see how you take all that, pull that together. Because invariably in those sessions, I sit there and I go, how's this gonna work with all these people? And then to see how you process that information and then bring it and actually work on it. It's not like we're just kind of sitting around talking about things that will never happen. Pretty much everything that was talked about is in a plan to be addressed. So I just kudos to you all for your work with that.
And I'd like to thank you for everything you guys do over the summer to get the new school year up and, in the best shape it can be for the students when they come in. But I know you guys work a lot hard over the summer, so I appreciate that.
Good, very good. Thank you. And that will conclude 5.02. Move on to item 7, policy, item 7.01. First reading of revised board policy 336, personal necessity leave. Item 7.02, first reading of revised board policy 800.1, electronic signatures and records. 7.03, first reading of revised board policy 827, conflict of interest. 7.04, first reading of revised policy 916, volunteers.
Dr. Bowman will be our point guard.
Dr. Bowman.
You want me to take the two and then I'll pass the time, Greg?
I thought I'd
Okay.
read them all in right now because I know it'll turn into.
Yeah, sounds good. I want to thank Mrs. Stater for her work on getting policy 336 ready for presentation tonight. The policy in front of you was updated to include additional language related to the request for military leaves of absences, to include legal references pursuant to the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, also known as USERRA, if you hear it that way, and the Pennsylvania Military Leave of Absence Act. Part-time and full-time employees are eligible for this leave, and HR will work accordingly with these employees to ensure that their time of leave adheres to those guidelines within the policies. 2 paragraphs in this case were added to this policy, the existing policy that is, to provide the needed clarity, and as per the suggestions provided by PSBA.
Questions on policy 7.01.
I heard you say that the part-time and full-time, and so that language that says any permanent would include the part-time,
Correct.
even though full-time is explicitly stated. That's what it's like. As long as we understand. That's great.
Do you need to explicitly mention space groups?
That's right.
I think.
We did talk about that. That came up in our discussion.
Well, they just chose the new astronauts. Did we have a teacher? Did we lose a teacher to them?
Not that I'm aware of.
So do we have enough?
Probably just a question of, of whether it's listed in that citation reference or not. So the number 4, so we can double check that. But in the PL 677, section 14, it's listed there.
Check. Surely follow up on that, not a problem. And then I'm gonna jump down to the 4th policy there, 916, volunteers. The recommended revisions in this policy in front of you align with the questions that surfaced during our April work session from last spring, if you remember. Mr. Bingham actually presented this originally. The policy has now been updated to include the necessary updates to legal citations, which there were a couple there that had to be tweaked, and expanded definitions as recommended by VSBA, of course, in accordance with the characteristics we chose to preserve from the previous policy, the existing policy. Additional provisions have been added to reflect legal guidance connected to documentation and processes required to serve as a volunteer, which align with the goal of student safety and security in the school setting. It was recommended for legal liability purposes.
Questions on 916?
Yeah, the only question I have there is with like something like junior achievement that happens at the middle school. Would those individuals that participate with that, is that one of the visitor roles since they're not, I mean, they're coming to share one class, but they're being not directly supervising children. Is that correct?
Correct.
Just because of the, I think it's great that we're requiring clearances and, protection, all that stuff, but just be clear.
Yeah, it really comes back down to the definition of, are they under direct supervision of the children or not? And, if you're on a field trip and you have a specific group that you're in charge of, then you're more of a volunteer in that role. Whereas if you're, there's teachers present and you're doing a presentation or you're assisting, like even some of the stuff we do at junior achievement at the high school, that would be more of a visitor than it is a volunteer, unless they're going to be directly supervising kids throughout that day, but typically they don't.
So does it matter that, I think in your example you gave when we talked about this the last time, you didn't have a teacher necessarily in the room, or you did?
Brian and I did it together. Somehow we got paired up and the teachers were in the hallways, but the teachers not.
I was gonna say same thing when I did interviews. with Juniors, I guess, last year. You're one-on-one in a little cubbyhole.
Yeah, but Mrs. Thunder is right in the hallway, technically supervising that whole process, because I engage in that as well. So, yeah, if there were any issues, all somebody would have to do is step out of one of those rooms and ask for her assistance. And she's facilitating all the students that arrive and come and go throughout that process.
So if I come on a regular basis and volunteer in a classroom, am I a visitor?
Yeah.
Because the teacher's always there.
If it becomes a regular basis, that's. the other
Regular
part of
basis
the-
is what
the definition.
differentiates those things versus a one-time, you come once a year to do this.
Party,
So
class
that's-
party, something like that. But if you're doing it every week, then
Every month.
Now, Jason did double check my clearances though, just in case when we were together and I was able to stay in the classroom. So I appreciate you making sure following the rules that are there.
Well, I do appreciate that the design of the high school has those fish bowls, because that also just provides literal transparency with that type of interaction. So I think whoever thought of that was brilliant. Yeah, I know that the person who was facilitating the interviews was definitely going around and make sure.
Any other questions on 7.04? Enough support to move that forward for next month.
I'll just check on that one citation for 336 for sure. For space groups.
7.02.
All right. So, this one's a little unique and when we review board policy, we like to share the proposed changes, but also to highlight the proposed changes. I think this is an example of a space where we can talk about the policy implications and what's coming before the board, but also an opportunity to highlight for the board something that we've changed internally to look for efficiency. And so with Dr. Bitz's support, we've been evaluating a variety of processes. We want to always maintain a standard, of effectiveness, but also look for opportunities where there might be sufficiency. And so electronic signatures and process automation is one of those areas. So there are implications for board policy, which we'll talk about after the presentation. I want to highlight a little bit about the specific platform that is helping give rise to the policy changes. So before we begin, I want to recognize Mrs. Ely in particular. Mrs. Stata is also part of the conversations as well, that we've embarked on. We've started new processes involving Inform K-12. And so some of the paper forms that we used to pass back and forth between the Logans and the district office, or our coordinators and principals, and then over to the district office, Inform K-12 is a platform that allows you to digitize forms and approval and workflow management. So things like mileage reimbursement can be completed electronically by the employee. They say, yes, everything is accurately represented. It goes to their supervisor electronically. They receive a notice, comes to the business office. And so really a more seamless flow of information. And frankly, it also allows us the opportunity to gain more visibility into if there's any holdups in the process, we can see where in that process it is, like with P card submissions even, like where's the P card submissions electronically, and maybe who needs to look at it and improve it. So want to talk a little through
Does everybody know what a P card is?
purchase card. So thank you. I'm sorry. Another acronym there. And so our purchase card system is one where we have credit cards, district issued credit cards for certain teacher leaders, for administrators. We do have compensating controls in place because credit cards, we want to make sure we're reviewing them. We want to make sure there's controls in place around spending. But ultimately, the P card process is an example. And I think maybe in one of Dr. Bitz's recent updates we shared, we had heard feedback on the last year that we were, I think, third in the state for P card rebate based on our utilization, which was about $51,000. And so that, in my mind, is maybe even another example of, instead of just issuing paper checks and electronic, EFTs, electronic funds transfers, we're able to decentralize a little bit of the purchasing process with controls, appropriate controls. But ultimately, through all the spend that comes through those P cards, we're getting back an annual rebate of upwards of, in this case, $51,000. And it's usually in that range, $40,000 to $50,000, depending on the year, which is, that's a nice rebate to have come back to us. But within that, I would say there's a variety of approval processes that can be automated through Inform K-12. This may be another way to say that. I think it has applications even beyond just business office and HR, and we are looking at that with student services. We're looking at with our department, like field trips, for instance. That's another one that gets passed all over the place. And so I think we can continue to find efficiency there.
Is this work school like a DocuSign thing?
Similar to DocuSign. So introduction to Inform K-12, what it is an opportunity to move critical processes online with a paperless system. Staff can complete forms, they can request approvals, we can track status, and also attach documents as needed to support whatever the request is. So in the case of P cards, we can attach things electronically, field trips, other information that might need to be attached for whoever's doing the review. And then the other piece, to Ms. Morgan's point, is able to obtain secure electronic signatures that are legally binding. And so I think a big step forward for efficiency and trying to cut down on some of the paper flow between our buildings. So I think we can reduce the time of approval, we can effectively track and manage. And so there's a variety of benefits, and we'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation. So an example of a preview of the system there, you can see Mrs. Ely filled a form out for herself. Well, maybe not completely, but what she would have done is logged in, and then on the left-hand side there, begin to document maybe where she had gone related to district business, what the mileage was. This is maybe a small nuance thing, but we're able to also pre-populate in a drop-down box, like what the distance is from the district office to Shepherdstown. This is all I think you know. It seems like a small thing, but with all the staff, it's
District office.
down to the 10th of a mile, we can make sure everybody uses the same thing, same metric. And so we're able to track that between buildings or other, I'll say places that maybe are frequented by our staff. Once Mrs. Ely has that entered or an employee has it entered, they can, send it on its way to the next level of approval. And then on the right-hand side, you can see the form saved, and then ultimately me as approving for Mrs. Ely would get an email. I can log in, I can see everything she's entered, I can see any attachments, and then I can just click approve, and then it goes right off to accounts payable for a check to be processed to whoever the employee is in this particular case.
Well, I see hundreds of these forms come in to me to look at, and they're all handwritten. So now you're just saying that they're going to be done electronically, but the form looks the same.
Yeah, it does look the same. And in some cases, the form might look the same and it's moving to an electronic platform. So there's still some data entry there, but there might be other cases where the forms that we enter electronically might get revised along.
So the data entry on the form though is typed. It's not
standard.
Yeah, edible.
So essentially, these are like PDF, this, you can design some PDFs, put some different form elements on it, and then assign essentially a workflow of business groups around that document.
That was, yeah, exactly, workflow, and to your point, it's a good point, the approval paths can change too, so like mileage reimbursements are probably an easier one, which is why we started with that as one of the examples, because it goes employee, supervisor, accounts payable, where field trip one, for instance, there's a lot of different tentacles to that one. The building nurses are involved, building principals, the offices, comes up to the district office. And so, we're mapping out all of those pieces as part of.
Now, if you were to do something like mission slips or something, does this tie into district data? So you know, well, I'm gonna send out an email with this form to this subset of students.
So it's a good question. The field trips currently are in the internal forms, but there could be an application in one K-12. We would have to see what does it make sense to eventually roll out to parents, because you don't have to have a login to service in the form. So I think we're still in the initial stages of just starting with internal forms like mileage reimbursement or the field trip, internal forms for field trip requests, but continuing to think about the plus.
Just as a parent, so sure.
Well, I had the same thought. But I was thinking that I don't know this to be a capability, that I would feel like that would run through Sapphire better, or something like that, where it would all be easier to kind of know who's done what. So this is all just staff public. Okay. No.
Initiating form in Form K-12. So as we said, there's no account needed, very straightforward. There's boxes that be populated, but we can also control pre-populated boxes to be drop downs to make data entry. To Ms. Morgan's point, we can help data entry in that way, so they're not going to check the grid to see what the mileage is between all the buildings. They're clicking, wherever they were going, and all that stuff goes over on, and helps reduce calculation errors because all the math and grossing everything up. So I think initiating is going to be effective from the standpoint that we standardize calculations, that we standardize data being put into the system, and also the efficiency.
I'm not kidding when sometimes you're dropping off a packet this wide of paperwork, and I would say half of them are reimbursements, a couple times a year. And so I can see that being a huge difference for you guys.
I feel like cutting out mileage reimbursement for driving around within the district would cut this out, though, just as it's like, that's not a joke. It just seems crazy, but the district's 11 miles. Like, we're not, I don't know.
I would say it's
another
probably
conversation.
most tied to people. There's some people that drive so frequently between the buildings. That's usually when you see it. Not so much like I might drive to Shepherdstown one day and back on not so many mileage, but I think it's more position specific for those that do probably drive a lot. So I think that's more where we see mileage.
Or if they go to a conference or something.
Sure.
Tight into that too. But yeah, there are a lot of people that are, assigned to more than one building, so they're going back and forth all the time. So.
And it's just one point, it's mileage reimbursement, it's reimbursement for expenses. There's a variety of reasons employees are so it will help. Here's some examples of things we either brainstormed and are working on or are thinking about. So everything from check request forms to federal time and effort reports. So we talked about our federal grants earlier in the evening. There's some compliance requirements around that. Fundraiser requests, whether that be our affiliated nonprofits or internal groups and clubs and activities, mileage reimbursement requests, and then student special activity payment requests, trust fund accounts. So I think really a good step in the right direction for internal form processing, looking for some efficiency, but making sure we're still.
What about course reimbursements?
Course reimbursements is a possibility. I think there's a variety, like as you start to expand this outward, like you can see a lot of these are business office related, but I think with HR, you can think about onboarding, course reimbursement. I think student services has a variety. I don't want to speak for Mrs. Bott and Mrs. Bridges, but I think they already have in their minds things that potentially could use in Form K-12 for. Dr. Bowman's working on the field trip one as well. And so I think it goes beyond just the business office. because Bobby had done a lot of the legwork on it, and so did Christina, we kind of made ourselves the guinea pig and try to pick forms that weren't maybe such a heavy lift, but I do think there's more opportunity.
We actually just recently sat down as a small committee and created a process whereby they can submit a proposal for a new form to be created in K-12 that we'd review and then approve.
So my next question, and I'm sure this is, you're getting to this cost of service.
Yeah, that is a good question. I will have
Already budgeted.
already budgeted.
Yeah, this,
Of course.
yeah, just to go back, this isn't something new. This is something that we've already initiated. And we just wanted to let you know one of the initiatives that we're engaged in as a district and why this is actually the impetus for the policy. So it was budgeted actually for several years, and we just hadn't moved forward with it. Last year, we finally signed the contract. So, not a new cost.
I'd have to imagine, you have so much savings, time and energy, confusion,
We believe so.
paper flow that would.
Copy.
We believe so.
And so there you can see endless possibilities. Mrs. Ely has graciously put the presentation together, was unable to join us this evening, but you can see some of the benefits that I think we've already talked about, but you can track the different approval steps to kind of see that things are flowing through the pipeline, eliminate errors, result in all staff productivity, standardized processes, improve speed and accuracy. I won't read them all, but those are a variety of the benefits connected to it. And then as we shared, intend to continue to look at this out.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Well, it's great presentation. Yeah, thank you. So Mrs. Ely is the, yeah. Sure.
Questions from Mr. Longwell on 7.02.
So the only other thing I want to mention about 702 then specific to policy is that because of electronic signatures, the policy did get a couple of revisions. One was that ultimately adding some language that the individual employee signing, it is their responsibility to acknowledge their signature, that they're authorized, and that they're also authorized to sign whatever it is they're signing. And so the significance of that is, depending on what the document is that we're using for electronic signatures, in this case, it's on K-12, but it has applicable uses in DocuSign. You know, there are contracts that maybe just Dr. Betts or I or Mrs. Ely sign, you know, versus there's things that staff might sign electronically, but ultimately the policy is specific to not just people, any electronic signature.
And just to be clear, the whole policy is brand new. So the pink and green doesn't really apply. The whole policy is brand new. The green is new as well.
So the green is just something changed. Different than the PSBA recommendation.
Correct, yeah. Typically, we don't put that part in there. So the whole policy, everything you see, the pink part will not appear in that. Everything you see is new policy.
Questions for Mr. Longwell? We'll move this forward for our October meeting, to the second reading and vote. Right, we'll move on to item 7.03, first reading of board policy 827. Mr. Longwell.
All right. This one doesn't have a presentation, but a couple small changes. So conflict of interest, obviously something we have just for good business practice, but also something that we maintain for federal grants and compliance. A couple of recommended changes there. You can see that added paragraph for definitional purposes, I would say. So what constitutes a conflict of interest and what types of relationships might constitute conflict of interest? So that's added to the policy. And then I would say, as is the statement there toward the end, that the district shall provide written notification of such protections. And so we've always had protocols and policy about no reprisal for whistleblowers or things of that nature. But there's also some requirements about posting, posting that as well. There are no
Questions on 7.03?
So I have a question on a fairly statement is that executive
obviously here is something. I don't think this is school district. So if I were to go to give us talk about software sometimes. It just seemed to be kind of like in there without a lot of content, so.
Yeah, I would say the honorarium depends on the situation. I mean, there's certainly, we have ethics responsibilities, certain employees do. Some of our contracted staff have language in their agreements about what other responsibilities they can do outside their employment with the district. And so depending on, I'm not trying to dodge the question, I just think honorariums could be situation. I'm just trying.
I was thinking if you have, let's say a teacher that also trains in education topic. And that same organization also sells curriculum. See, I mean, because I can see how this starts.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the devil's the details there, to your point, like that, we wouldn't want to see an employee, like if we're looking into, I don't know, curriculum materials, we wouldn't want to see an employee speak about those curriculum materials at a conference and then receive like a $10,000 honorarium, but then they're somehow involved in the decision-making process on the materials. So it's like, it's those types of things that we would be looking at with respect to an honorarium versus maybe someone just speaks on a topic that they're an expert in and they get a $200 honorarium from a conference that they attended. I think that's obviously good.
What if they are working for Everyday Math as a consultant and then they give a presentation in the district? And they get paid, they shouldn't get paid for that then, or they should by
So if they
Everyday Math
work for Everyday Math, I'm sorry,
as a
as a
consultant,
consultant.
and they come and they do a presentation or training or whatever for Everyday Math.
Yeah.
We just wouldn't have that happen, we'd have someone else.
Or if a teacher writes a book and then her thing.
I think that statement is
Yeah, beautiful.
very, very broad.
Sure.
And vague.
Well,
Yeah, I think it's all
I think the
qualified.
question of leave.
Even if bringing in conflict, to me, even if you had to define conflict of interest or something, I think could be. But yeah, just like,
Get paid twice.
no, no employee or board member shall accept an honorarium.
It's like based on around their position in the school district or something like that. Like it's to, you could go do something for your day job where you make money, but it has nothing to do with the school.
That just sounds like you just can't. And if there is a potential conflict of interest, don't take it on forever. You can still talk, you can still do so, but it does have a relation. I guess the other concern here is with, school board directors, campaign finance. Things are getting more heated, in the election cycle. Is the standard campaign finance reporting, does that handle that? Because you could always have, you could say there's a conflict of interest, you're getting money from an organization or PAC, that you're going to make certain decisions. So if that was handled. Not that I'm thinking about, gobs and gobs.
Well, I wouldn't want our board policy to end up in some area of election law that we end up in some weird mismatch between it, right? So I hear what you're saying about like, you got a $10,000 contribution. Somebody to your campaign, that would be clearly something that would you'd have to disclose, and that would be there in those types of reports already. Whether you know.
So maybe I'll say it this way, and this might be oversimplification. I think honorarium, what we'd really be looking for is if you're in a decision-making capacity for the district as a board director, administrator, we wouldn't want you to be making a decision on something that is as outlined by these relationships that's a benefit to you or your family or anything of that sort. And that could be honorarium. That's one way to call it, but there's any number of compensation. And so it's just kind of keeping an arm's length. And I'll go back to something in my public accounting days that was drilled into our minds was that we had to be independent in fact and appearance. And so it wasn't just simply like the factual aspect of or keeping a high integrity in all of our business transactions or personal transactions, but the appearance piece as well, that it didn't look like our independence was compromised because of what we might have. So I would say it's that decision-making piece, the relationship piece, and then what is the decision, and that it's not giving personal gain.
Just
Changes
excuse
recommended by-
yourself from the vote too. You've got some con.
Abstain, yeah, and there's that too. Yeah, and I think that does happen, certain people here before where they abstain. Sorry.
Dr. Woods.
Yes, right. PSBA recommend.
So you'll make some adjustments around the honorarium? I mean, I didn't think about that, but I mean, I get honorariums for all kinds of things.
I think we can talk to Mr. Ho, but that's because it does look like that comes from a legal citation, and frankly, it actually has been on policy, because again, this policy is not new, so that line, it simply said no public official or public employee shall accept an honorarium. So that is already in policy technically.
That's been there as long as I have.
Yeah.
I mean, PSBA was always very adamant, you shouldn't do it. And if it had in any way related to your responsibility as a school director.
Right.
But
we
that's
can
what
find
Shane
out
just
some
wanna
more.
add that. Yeah.
I think if you're careful when you add to what's actually like a legal citation based on things that have already occurred, as far as.
Well, and I don't wanna go further than legal citation and end up messing up things that in reality have nothing to do with school board.
Right.
Like, I believe in your example, nothing you're taking from is, and none of these honorariums do have any conflict with us now. So if we write further language into this policy, I feel that there are unintended consequences of this to try and go beyond the standard that's there. Whether it's election law or whatever, I get the intent of it. For sure, I want us to all act ethically in what we're doing, but I don't want to end up writing ourselves into some weird situation.
Yeah. and
We'll
that's
certainly
the point
find some more.
that it's currently on the books.
We can find out some detail.
The other conversation on 7.03. We'll move that forward for the October 2nd meeting. All right, with that, item 9, meeting is adjourned.